Hey everyone, it's Alex, and welcome to the Marvel Snap Decks of the Week, the weekly series where I showcase the top 10 best decks in Marvel Snap. This is coming to you live from PAX West in Seattle. I'm recording in my hotel room, and the lighting is just as bad as the internet here, so hopefully this video even goes up. But you know what? We have a brand new OTA in Marvel Snap, and so I know a lot of people are very interested in seeing how the meta has shifted, so we're going to be talking about the top 10 best decks right now. And number one is going to be the discard deck. Now, by number one, I mean number 10, but basically it's running a 54% win rate, which at first glance seems like it would be a little low for a list like this, but it's running a phenomenal cube rate at 0.41. I think very kind of smart decisions with regards to retreating and stuff might lead to a lower win rate as a whole, but when this deck pops off, it definitely does pop off, and I think we're seeing very strong statistics here. I do like the inclusion of Moon Knight. It tends to be a little disruptive here and there. We're also obviously hoping to hit your Swarm and your Proxima Midnight, and hopefully dodging something like a Dracula. But overall, it's performing very well. The sample rate is pretty high too. It looks like discard is seeing a lot of play thanks to the missions in the bounty board, but the deck's performing pretty well, so don't sleep on discard right now. That takes us to number 9, and it's a significant fall from grace for Loki Erisham, but we are seeing a 55% win rate and a relatively low cube rate at 0.24. Now, there's still a lot of experimentation around with Loki. I do think the card is going to make a comeback to some degree, and I think we are starting to see some decks emerge. This is currently the Loki Erisham version that is kind of leading the pack. But as you can see, the stats are not nearly what they used to be. A 55% win rate and a 0.24 cube rate is just quite not enough to make it an exciting proposition to play this particular deck. And for most people, I think that's an exciting thing because you're probably sick of Loki Erisham. So, I mean, the meta has shifted. If you're an Erisham main, then you're probably looking for something new to play, and the brewing still continues as Loki has definitely fallen off quite significantly with the OTA change. That takes us to our next deck here. It's going to be All-In Toxic. Now, I wanted to include this here because I wanted to show you kind of like what's being brewed in the meta right now. It's a 56% win rate, which is pretty solid, but the cube rate is far too low, I think, to be a very consistent, climbing deck or ranking deck. But I want to show you what's happening here, right? Basically, you have a hazmat-based deck that is utilizing the U.S. Agent. It also has Speed, Ajax, and Man-Thing with Wiccan, of course. So there's a lot going on in this particular deck, and I like to see cooks like this. So if you're interested in Toxic as an archetype as a whole, this might be one that you kind of want to start with and then start experimenting with and seeing if you can make some improvements from a deck building perspective. Now, this is a decent performing Ajax deck. Ajax tends to overperform his 5-costed stat line, and we're seeing that in with the likes of Gilgamesh, for instance. So if you're interested in brewing, this is a good starting point. Despite the fact the win rate's pretty good, the cube rate is just a little too low. And that takes us to our next deck, which is going to be Sandman, another deck that's fallen from grace quite a bit. But still, people are, they're playing it, they like it, and it's decent. At a 56% win rate, that's definitely middle of the pack. But what's going to be a little on the lower side is going to be that cube rate of 0.26. It's just not as competitive as some of the other decks we're going to be talking about here. There's definitely some better choices, and I think that's a good thing, right? You're talking about cards that, there's a couple cards that got nerfed here, including Sandman and Nocturne themselves, but overall, the archetype is still definitely playable, just not quite as powerful as it once was, despite the fact we're going to be talking about a couple decks that do have combo-centric turn 6s, which would benefit, would be a detriment to play against something like a Sandman. So, it's ho-hum right now at number 7. And then we go to number 6 here, and we have a new and emerging Pixie deck that features Wiccan. We're starting to see that Wiccan is making a lot of these different decks here, which has been pretty interesting considering that Wiccan as a whole was kind of a bit of a ho-hum card, right? People weren't quite sure if it was going to be a meta shaker, and it is finding itself into a number of decks. And a lot of them aren't running the Quicksilver Domino combo that a lot of people are kind of coping with for the first week or so. You are seeing stuff like Maria Hill, which gives better curves. This one has Spider-Ham as well, and a lot of Kitty Pryde-based decks. But this one here running Pixie and, of course, the Mobius and Mobius, which tends to be a borderline requirement in a Pixie deck, is performing pretty well. I mean, at a 44 cube rate, you cannot argue the performance there. The win rate is, again, middle of the pack, but a very strong cube rate at 0.44. So if you're looking to kind of take people by surprise and play some Pixie, then this is probably a good choice for you. It's a deck that, honestly, you get that early, you get Wiccan, you get the early Alliance, which can be very disruptive, an early Magneto, which can kind of disrupt their locations in lane positions. and Legion, which I think is one of my favorite cards in Marvel Snap that's seeing almost no play right now. I mean, I shouldn't be saying that. It's obviously making a deck like this. But I think that Legion is kind of making a bit more waves than it had traditionally over the last several months. So it's good to see that Legion is seeing some significant play again. And that takes us to Oddbolt. Now, Oddbolt is a deck that's been kind of circulating the meta for the last little bit. Essentially, the idea here is you run a whole lot of value stuff that activates, your Darkhawk. But most importantly as well, you'll notice that it is running Moon Knight, but it really is only going to target, their hand, or it's going to target your Proxima, right? And so with that being said, you have a lot of cards here that, they help activate the Darkhawk specifically while also providing some disruption. I do like the Viper into Hood play, and Viper obviously helps to counteract some of the, the junk play that might be, you might be seeing here and there. But I really do like the idea of having Proxima coming down. You have a Temple play on like a Moon Knight, you hit the Proxima, you discard something valuable from their hand. That also discounts your stature, and you have Black Bolt as well. Ironically, in my experience playing this deck, which I've played quite a bit, I do feel like Black Bolt's probably the weak link. He feels like he probably could use a buff to 5-8 power, but then again, this deck's performing well. 57% win rate and a .30 cube rate, easily one of the best places for the new Moon Knight. So honestly, it's pretty good, and so maybe Black Bolt is just fine after all. And then as we go to our top 4 here, we do have a new brew with Attuma and Nimrod. The idea behind this deck is that if you can set it up so that Attuma is in a position with Nimrod, Attuma should destroy the Nimrod and then basically allow it to propagate through the game, right, through the board state. So pretty interesting deck here. Attuma in Destroy here is giving you a little bit of a targeted destroy, which is kind of interesting. It will also give me that 10 power. The change is pretty significant to Attuma. A lot of brewing still happening. This is kind of like an early leader in a synergistic destroy-based Attuma deck. But it would appear as though Attuma is going to be a very playable card with the most recent OTA change. And so I'm actually really excited to see how it shakes up over the next couple of weeks, because I've actually always liked Attuma. I used to play behind Invisible Woman and stuff like that, so kind of skirting around the disadvantage of what it did. And now it has a much more concise identity, and so we'll have to see how it performs in the coming future. But I mean, a .33 cube rate at 57% win rate, it's solid. It really is pretty interesting in this particular deck. As we go into our top 3, we do have a Gwen Surfer deck, which is performing pretty damn well at a .39 cube rate at 57% win rate. A lot of 57% win rates today. And again, this one here is going to be running your Nova, your Killmonger, your Forge into Brood, Absorbing Man, stuff like that. I do like the inclusion of Hope Summers. Again, Hope Summers was being cut from a lot of these decks for various reasons, but I do like Hope Summers here because it gives you that extra reach, especially with the Absorbing Man, with Gwenpool and stuff like that. Well, not so much Gwenpool, but Absorbing Man specifically. So, because you can play on the Hope Summers on turn 5, and then what you can do is you can place the Silver Surfer, and with that additional energy that you did get from Hope Summers, while playing on top of her, of course, you can play Absorbing Man as well. I still tend to prefer the Sarah-based decks for Silver Surfer, but from a performance standpoint, this one is currently top dog, right? To each his own, right? If you like Sarah Surfer, you can definitely still play some Sarah Surfer. There ain't nothing wrong with that. I'm telling you, I love it. But statistically, this is one of the absolute top performing decks in the meta right now, despite obviously a lot of the changes. And sometimes you get a lot of changes, and while the cooking's happening, a lot of players go back to their tried-tested and true decks, and they just perform while other people are kind of trying to brew and stuff like that. It wouldn't surprise me if in the next coming weeks or so, this deck kind of falls down a little bit, while we have a couple brews that emerge, particularly with Attuma. I think that Attuma is going to be very interesting. When we talk about interesting as well, this kind of caught me by surprise when looking at the statistics, but a 57% win rate and a .52 cube rate, which is incredible. It's an incredible cube rate there. And believe it or not, it is a Wiccan-based Galactus deck that does include Quicksilver. You have a lot of activators here for trying to get that Wiccan out early, including Zabu and Psylocke, but you also have the Kate Bishop in order to help you curve, and you got the Wave. You got the Wave, and of course you have the Cannonball, which got recently buffed as well. If you missed Cannonball, well, he looks like he's making a bit of a comeback here with that additional power, right? We talked about on the Snapchat too that it seemed like that power taken off Cannonball was quite a bit. So he's back, and we got an Alliance-based Galactus deck, and whether or not this is a good thing, we have a good performing Galactus deck again. I mean, that's up for discussion, I guess, but it definitely is performing well at a 57% win rate and a 52 cube rate. And that takes us to our number one deck of the week, and it is Zoo, and there's nothing fancy here. Zoo honestly continues to be an absolute top performer. You got Marvel Boy, it's pretty much the same deck it's been over and over again. Nico coming in and out of these decks over the last little bit, but Nico is in the top performing deck this past week. It's just good. It's just good. I think one of the biggest changes to this deck was honestly, obviously, the addition of Marvel Boy and the buff to Gilgamesh, but also the buff to Shauna too. Shauna has been really resilient in her spot in this deck, and I think that there was some early cutting of Shauna, but it's very clear that Shauna does allow you to get that early Mockingbird or to sneak Mockingbird out alongside Gilgamesh on turn 6 to discount it enough. This deck's performing incredibly. A 60% win rate at a 0.49 cube rate. This is absolutely a fantastic deck, and it has been for like 2 months now. I'm almost getting sick of talking about it near the top of the list here. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you on that next one.